Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. Let's start with the economy, and like we alluded to in yesterday's video, there are strong signals from economic indicators in February that Chinese activity is rebounding. While we need to keep in mind that month-on-month and year-on-year performance is coming off a low base, and that some of this rebound is from pent-up demand, it is positive news nonetheless that suggests that the worst of zero COVID and opening up disruptions are well and truly in the past. Let's briefly move through some of these indicators. The news making the headlines this news cycle is the official Purchasing Managers Index, not to be confused with the private Caixin PMI we covered in yesterday's video, for February surging to a 10-year high. Though again, we recognize that this is from a low base. The Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing stood at 52.6 in February, a gain of 2.5 points from the previous month. All the sub-indexes climbed month on month. The production sub-index jumped 6.9 points to 56.7. The new export order sub-index surged 6.3 points to 52.4 after 21 straight months of contraction. The business activity expectations sub-index, a good indicator for business confidence, gained 1.9 points to reach 57.5. If reporting from Bloomberg's Hong Kong team is accurate, it appears that even Beijing leadership was surprised by just how soon economic activity has returned. Quote, "The infection wave that followed the abrupt removal of pandemic restrictions ended faster than senior officials had expected," the person said. The outbreak was expected to last at least through to February or March of this year, but most of the population was already infected by the end of January, allowing the economy to recover quickly. End quote. We remember that analysts and officials were equally surprised by how fast the first wave of Omicron washed over the virgin population in December, with an estimated 1 billion infections in the first 40 days. Beijing is currently holding its Lianghui, or 2 meetings, with the National People's Congress meeting in a few days. With earlier than expected economic rebound, it may push the officials to pull back on economic stimulus plans somewhat, though this will also depend on how long they expect the rebound to last. Quote, "The high PMI readings partly reflect the economy's weak starting point coming into this year, and are likely to drop back before long as the pace of the recovery slows." End quote. And, quote, "Looking ahead, it will be hard to keep up this brisk pace, with global growth slowing and pent-up demand after COVID reopening likely to fade. Still, with policies swinging toward growth support, the recovery should sustain momentum into the second quarter." End quote. Nevertheless, state media is taking the opportunity to take what is likely a premature victory lap, with many "I told you so" articles. For example, quote, "As China, the world's largest manufacturing powerhouse, revs up its economic engines after the conclusion of the Spring Festival holidays, certain Western doomsayers have been making knee-jerk exaggerations about headwinds faced by China's foreign trade." End quote. Chinese economists are more cautious, however. Quote, "The impact of the pandemic remains far-reaching. Currently, the foundation for economic recovery is not yet solid, and it will take time to fully restore production and social order to normal." End quote. And it is not just manufacturing which is seeing a rebound. After 20 long months of decline, with the help of massive and expensive government support, China's home sales rose for the first time in February. According to data from China Real Estate Information Corp, the value of new home sales by the 100 biggest real estate developers jumped 14.9% in February year-on-year to $67 billion. We should keep in mind, however, that the Lunar New Year holiday was in February last year, whereas it was in January this year. But of course, this level is still well below the pre-housing crisis level. As with the manufacturing performance, analysts agree that this is good news, but inquire, how long will it last? Quote, "Initial signs have emerged that the home market may be rising again. Whether the recovery can sustain in March depends on home buyers' purchasing power." End quote. Next up, US-China relations continue to worsen. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. And as always, anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep the channel sustainable, or anyone who just wants to show their appreciation with a tip, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Okay, let's move through US-China bilateral developments from the last 48 hours or so. Spoiler alert, it's all negative. UK-based Reuters, in an exclusive report yesterday, writes, citing 4 unnamed US officials and officials from other countries, that the US is, quote, sounding out close allies about the possibility of imposing new sanctions on China if Beijing provides military support to Russia for its war in Ukraine, end quote. The outlet continues that one official, quote, from a country consulted by Washington, end quote, said that they had only seen scant intelligence backing up the claims about China considering possible military assistance to Russia. A US official, however, quote, said they were providing detailed accounts of the intelligence to allies, end quote. Meanwhile, multiple US agencies, including most recently the director of the FBI, are now standing behind the lab leak hypothesis as the most likely explanation for the pandemic's origin, expressing in an interview with US media yesterday, Tuesday, quote, the FBI has for quite some time now assessed that the origins of the pandemic are most likely a potential lab incident in Wuhan. I will just make the observation that the Chinese government, it seems to me, has been doing its best to try to thwart and obfuscate the work here, end quote. Director Wray made the same statement at the recent first hearing of the U.S. House Special Committee, quote, on the threat of the Chinese Communist Party to the United States, end quote. During the hearing, committee chairman Mike Gallagher expressed, quote, we may call this a strategic competition, but this is not a polite tennis match. This is an existential struggle over what life will look like in the 21st century, and the most fundamental freedoms are at stake, end quote. In response to this special committee, the People's Republic of China Foreign Ministry, in a press event, expressed, quote, we call on the relevant US institutions and individuals to abandon their ideological bias and zero-sum Cold War mentality, develop an objective and rational perception of China and US-China relations, stop framing China as a threat based on disinformation, stop denigrating the Communist Party of China, and stop trying to score political points at the expense of US-China relations, end quote. At the same press event, the People's Republic of China Foreign Ministry spokesperson also expressed opposition to the USTR report on Chinese WTO compliance published yesterday. Quote, more than 20 years after it acceded to the World Trade Organization, China still embraces a state-led economic and trade approach that runs counter to the open, market-oriented principles endorsed by all members of the organization. China's approach makes it an outlier and continues to cause serious harm to workers and businesses in the United States and around the world, end quote. And perhaps the most concerning statement made by a senior US official in recent days on the theme of China-US relations, quote, if we got into a major war with China, the United States homeland would be at risk as well, with both kinetic attacks and non-kinetic attacks, whether it's cyber attacks on the power grid or on pipelines. They're going to go after the will of the United States public. They're going to try to erode support for a conflict, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I know today's episode was somewhat heavy, but wherever you are, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you all tomorrow.